Good afternoon and welcome to this CWIEME Tech Talks about analyzing supply-demand dynamics for power transformers in Europe amid rapid infrastructure development. I'm Alexandra Martins and I'm CWIEME Berlin Senior Content Manager. We are delighted to have you all here joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the presentation and connecting virtually with your peers. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a couple of housekeeping points for this session. If you have any questions, please add them in the comments. The webinar will be available on demand after the session, and the slides can be downloaded from our website. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers, Hassan Zair, Managing Partner and Chief Operating Officer, and Hazar Fayaz, Senior Research Analyst at PTR. I will now hand over to our speakers. Welcome, Hassan, and welcome, Azar.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, and thank you so much, Kwame, for the platform as well to talk about this crucial topic today. Over the last year and a little bit more than that, we have seen in the transformers industry, specifically power transformers, that there is a big gap in terms of demand versus supply, and increasingly we have been getting this question from our customers as well as other stakeholders in the market, whether this demand is sustainable or not, whether the supply will be able to meet this demand, or what would be the supply demand balance, how it looks like. So today in this webinar, we will be talking about the supply demand dynamics of power transformers, as well as do a deep dive into the European market. Very quickly, if we are to look at the table of contents, so we'll start by talking about the power transformers market globally, what kind of demand we're looking at moving forward. But then we will get also into the global supply dynamics from a power transformers perspective, both for small and medium power transformers as well as the large power transformers. And then lastly, we will jump into the deep dive of the European market, as well as what would be some strategic takeaways from our perspective in terms of the manufacturers or the component or the raw material suppliers. With that said, I would like to very quickly start with an introduction of PTR for those of you who might not know the company. So we are a strategic growth partner in the electrical infrastructure and manufacturing space. We help companies with various solutions to enhance or to support their growth, as well as their strategic decision making. So for example, we provide a lot of market intelligence on electrical equipment markets, which is anywhere from transformers and switchgear to other very specific electrical infrastructure industry topics. We also support our clients for actual marketing services as well, in terms of supporting them with their marketing needs, and then marketing strategy and the content that they need to be placed in the media. Combining both of them, we're also helping our clients on more strategic topics as an advisor, looking at their go-to-market strategy, for example, helping them with their new market entry, whether it's a new product, whether it's a new market that they're going to, different pricing strategies, for example. And then lastly, we also have an expert network called Cognito, which is a network that offers a diverse panel of industry expert if you're looking to interview to learn more about the products and solutions and how they fit with your end customer. Um, in terms of the topics that we focus on, we are specialized in power grid electrical equipment topics. So as I said, transformers, switchgear, flexible AC transmission systems, substation and grid automation, but more and more we're looking at the grid edge topics as well, such as EV charging infrastructure and energy storage as well. And then lastly, just one comment on why you should listen to us in terms of transformers research. We've been doing this research for the last 10 years, looking at the transformers market, both power and distribution transformers in detail, looking at different segmentations within each country, looking at the transformers going into the transmission, distribution, generation, as well as industry for primary and secondary distribution across different voltage ranges, across different transformer technologies as well. So this research, or the overview that you would see today in terms of the supply demand capacity, is being fed by our market intelligence on this topic. Having said that, I would like to hand it off to my colleague Azhar Fayaz, who is the lead analyst for transformers research at PTR and has been doing it for how many years I can't even recall now. Over to you, Azhar, to walk everyone through the topic of today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Hassan, for the introduction. Before we dive into the details, let me address a question that you said, like on everyone's mind these days. Is the surge in transformer demand truly sustainable, or are we looking at a bubble that's bound to burst? So the short answer to this is yes, this demand is real and it's here to stay, at least for the next decade. So what sets this growth cycle apart from the past is that it's not driven by any single factor. So for the first time in history, we are seeing a convergence of multiple long-term trends. For example, we are looking at renewable energy integration, grid modernization, electrification across different industrial sectors, accelerating industrialization, and the rapid urbanization. So this multi-dimensional demand is creating a structural shift in the market, and this is not a temporary spike. And that's exactly what makes this moment both exciting and critical for the stakeholders across the value chain, that include both transformer OEMs as well as the raw material suppliers. Now, if we look at the global power transformer market, then the power transformer market size was about $27 billion in 2024, as per PTR estimate, and it is expected to grow with a CAGR of 10% to almost $49 billion by the end of 2030. If we zoom into the regional breakdown of the global power transformer market, then the total transformer market in the APAC region accounted for about 45% of the global market, which is a huge share. So it's safe to say that any movement in the APAC region will have an impact on the entire world. Now, some of the key driving factors of power transformers in the Asia Pacific, if we see, then those are the increasing electricity demands due to the electrification and urbanization trends, renewable energy transition, and accelerated industrial growth, especially in Vietnam and Indonesia. Following APAC region, we have North America with 22% regional share, majorly because of the utilities in the United States. They are replacing their decades-old grid, which presents a significant challenge to the largest global economy. So that grid was established back in 1970s, which has reached its end of life, and now they need to replace it. This existing system of transmission wire, substation, and transformers, they are already operating beyond their end of life. According to the US Department of Energy, more than 70% of the power transformers are operating beyond their design life, and almost 2.1% of the total transformer fleet, the installed fleet of power transformers, is retired annually and replaced with a new one. So this aging process not only reduces the capacity of a grid to withstand physical stresses, but also elevates the risk of failures. And the failure of critical grid components can result in extensive outages and prolonged recovery periods. Then we have Europe with the then we have Europe with 16% share, which is majorly driven by the EU's Fit for 55 package for green energy transition and different electricity interconnection targets. Now, if we talk about the Middle East Africa, then it accounts for the 12% market share, as the oil rich Arab countries in GCC region, they are strategically reallocating their investments away from oil and gas assets towards the economic diversification initiatives. They are investing heavily in infrastructure projects, and this has sparked a wave of massive infrastructure like development across the Middle East. Similarly, we have seen a lot of investment in the Africa region from the Chinese investors and Indian investors, as well as Eskom, which is a major utility in South Africa. Now, this surge in infrastructure projects is set to definitely drive the demand for power transformers, as network expansions and the integration of renewable energy sources become focal point of development efforts. At last, we have South America with 5% market share, and that is primarily driven by the expansion of the region's transmission infrastructure to integrate more renewable energy sources into the grid. Anticipated urban population growth in South America is also expected to fuel 70% rise in energy demand by 2030. To meet this demand, both local and foreign companies are heavily investing in the region's energy sector, and that is leading to the development of new power projects in the region. And definitely, this increased activity underscores the growing need for the power transformers as well. Now, if you talk about some of the major trends related to the global power transformer market, then as discussed, aging infrastructure and increasingly severe weather events, they are prompting a global upsurge in grid modernization initiatives, as utilities are striving to enhance their grid reliability and resilience. So this trend is particularly pronounced in the United States and the Nordic countries of the Europe, where significant investments are being directed towards upgrading transmission networks. The replacement markets hold a significant share of the annual demand within the US market specifically, because the network spending in the US has outpaced electricity demand growth. Most of the investment that happens in the US, that is directed towards the replacements. So In the last few years, about one third of the investment that happened in the US grid that was directed purely towards the I would say expansion, while two-third was directed towards the replacement of the already installed equipment. Not just the aging infrastructure in the US, but the recent extreme weather events, they have also revealed the weakness of the US grid and raised a concern about the network reliability. According to a report, between 2002 and 2021, the US encountered 229 weather events, and each resulted in damages exceeding $1 billion. This is a significant increase if we compare that to the previous period from 1980 to 2001, which only had 94 such events. It has been reported that outages in the past 10 years had increased by 64% compared with the previous decade because of global warming. Now, according to EIA data, in 2021, the average duration of power outages experienced by the US electricity customers was slightly over 7 years, which we call as SID index. Now, out of these 7 hours, more than 5 hours were attributed to the major events such as snowstorms, hurricanes, and wildfires. Now, this marks a significant increase compared to the average duration of 3 to 4 hours for outages earlier between 2013 to 2016. Department of Energy has emphasized multiple times that these events resulting from global warming, they serve as a clear indication that the existing energy infrastructure in the US is not equipped to withstand the ongoing impacts of extreme weather events fueled by the climate change and need to be upgraded or replaced. Thus, this instigate the demand for the power transformers. If we talk about the European market or decarbonization in general, then this drive toward decarbonization is resulting in the need for expansion and modernization of the power grid, which in turn is giving rise to the demand for legacy grid equipment and components, including power transformers. One of the key components of decarbonization is the increased adoption of renewable energy sources, which are essential for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The penetration of renewable energy sources has increased significantly in recent years, with many countries setting ambitious targets by 2030 for their adoption. And this is driven by a desire to move away from fossil fuels and towards a more sustainable energy future. We have seen this trend more prevalent after the Russia-Ukraine crisis in the European markets. This shift towards sustainability involves transitioning to renewable energy sources such as wind and solar power. While this move benefits the environment, it poses unique challenges for integrating these variable sources into the existing grid. So, unlike traditional fossil fuel power plants, wind and solar generation fluctuate depending on the weather conditions. Therefore, upgrading the grid is essential to manage these fluctuations and ensure a stable electricity supply. Another key component of decarbonization is the increased penetration of electric vehicles that is leading to a growing network of charging infrastructure. However, as we move towards the decarbonization, there's a need for expansion and modernization of the power grid. Now, grid expansion is necessary to accommodate the growing demand for renewable energy sources and also to support the infrastructure that is required for the charging of electric vehicles. Then there comes the like there are the new trends or the growing trends of digitalization in the power transformers. Uh, so digitalization is imperative not just for the power transformers or transformers in general, but the power grid as a whole. And it is important because it is fundamental to support these decarbonization initiatives like EV adoption and renewable integration. According to CGRE, 50% reduction in the risk of catastrophic failures and 60% reduction in repair costs can be achieved due to the early detection of faults in power transformers. So what happens is when you are able to collect all this data from digital transformers, you are able to carry out preventive maintenance timely. And this preventive maintenance basically gives you a chance to reduce your breakdowns, to lower your downtime of your assets, to lower your O&M costs, and especially with the advent of COVID-19, which was really unprecedented, utilities have realized the importance of working remotely. And in these cases, digital transformers will give the on-site staff the opportunity to do remote monitoring, and it will be beneficial not in cases of some accidents, but also in other cases when they are, really unable to work on site. Um, Another emerging trend in the transformer industry is the usage of green raw materials in transformer manufacturing, and they offer like these materials, they offer more sustainable, environment friendly alternatives to the traditional materials. Every company or everyone nowadays is trying to reduce their carbon footprint. Every other day we see some plans being announced by the utilities generation companies that how they are trying to reduce their carbon footprint. So transformer manufacturing also plays a role over there. So for example, if we talk about the ester based fluids, which are common example of green raw materials used in the transformers. Another example is the green steel, which is produced using recycled materials and renewable energy sources such as wind or solar power. So, by using green steel, manufacturers can reduce their carbon footprint and environmental impact compared to the traditional steel production methods that used to rely heavily on the fossil fuels. If we add to that the surge in electrification and the post-pandemic infrastructure investment, like I said, there are multiple factors in play after the COVID-19. So we have a perfect storm of rising demand, which has led to longer lead times of power transformers and higher capacity utilization rate of transformer manufacturers worldwide. Now, owing to this supply demand imbalance, particularly for the power transformers which are used in renewable energy projects like solar and wind power plants, where the duty cycles vary a lot throughout the day, manufacturers which basically supply power transformers to these segments, they are benefiting from healthy profit margins, and they are actively investing in new production facilities globally because they are anticipating sustained long-term demand. Similarly, the rapid urbanization trend throughout the APEC region, that is also aggravating the electricity demand and thus necessitating the extensive grid expansion and the integration of smart technologies. Other than that, another emerging trend is the increasing usage of generative AI. This growing data center industry further increases demand and highlights the need for a robust grid infrastructure to ensure reliable power access. This will also act as a catalyst to increase the demand for sophisticated high voltage equipment and grid expansion. So nowadays, like uh, I would say hyperscale data centers with gigawatts levels, they are coming online, and definitely they need power transformers to connect with the grid, because grid code dictates whether a data center of a certain capacity will connect with the medium voltage level network or a high voltage level network. Now, whatever we have discussed so far, so that was a high level 50,000 foot view of the global power transformer market. Now, it's important to distinguish between the two key segments, large power transformers and small to medium power transformers. The reason we are trying to distinguish between these two is because like they differ significantly in both application and supply demand dynamics. In our analysis, small to medium power transformers, they are basically defined as the units which range from 10 to 100 MVA and typically operate at voltages up to 110 kilowatt. So more than 42 kilowatt all the way up to 110 kilowatt, more or less. And these are essential for, let's say, regional distribution, industrial loads, and renewable integration. If we compare that to the large power transformers, then large power transformers are the one which exceed 100 MVA and are usually deployed at high voltage levels, often around 220, 380 kV level, to support the long distance and the cross-border transmission. While both segments are critical, their market behavior, their investment activity by the manufacturers, and the capacity challenges, they are fundamentally different. Now, if we take a closer look at the market dynamics for large power transformers all the way from 2024 to 2030, then our PTR estimate shows that by the end of this decade, 2030, global demand for large power transformers is expected to grow at a healthy CAGR of around 6%. In contrast, the global production capacity is forecasted to grow more modestly at about 3.8%, with actual production expected to rise by 5.5%. The difference between the total production capacity and the actual production capacity is that uh, you have the utilization rate. So let's say if there is a facility that can manufacture uh, 100,000 MVAs transformers per annum, but due to certain reasons they are unable to fully realize their potential and only manufacturing, let's say 80,000. So that means like their utilization rate is 80%, and that's their actual production. Now, PTR analysis predicts that there is a continued need for more large power transformer production facilities, particularly in the North American and Middle East Africa markets, as future demands, like the demand segment in these regions, it outpaces the production capacities which are already announced in the regions. This widening gap between the demand and supply is tightening utilization levels, which currently average around 70% globally and are projected to reach 80% by 2030. So you see, like this increasing trend of utilization rates, this is the reason we see the higher CAGR, that is 5.5% for actual production, compared to the 3.8% CAGR for the total production. So this higher utilization rate is basically driving the higher growth rate of actual production than the total production capacity. Now, it's important to note that this average utilization rate that we just saw, it masks regional variation as well. So, leading APAC manufacturers, particularly those located in South Korea, Japan, and China, they are already operating at utilization rates more than 80%. Meanwhile, smaller players in the countries like India and parts of China, they are still in the 50 to 70% range. That that shows there is a clear disparity in the operational efficiency and the capacity usage across the region, in fact worldwide. On the supply side, lead times continue to be a challenge, especially in the Europe and North America markets, where transformer delivery can take up to 5 years. Even APAC region, which traditionally offers shorter lead times of around 1 year, that is also starting to see pressure. Some suppliers are now booking orders as far out as 2028 and beyond, particularly for the North American projects, because they have to make specific transformers that meets the North American standards for them. The majority of global production growth that is being driven by the APAC is expected to add approximately 240,000 MVAs of light power transformers by 2030, and Europe and North America follow that. So Europe with 75,000 expected capacity addition, and North America with more than 60,000 MVAs. On the investment front, we are seeing major players scaling up aggressively. So Hitachi Energy leads the charge globally, while in the Americas, Siemens Energy and WEG are also expanding to serve the surging North American market. Some South Korean manufacturers like LS Electric, Hyundai, Hyosung, they are also strategically investing in capacity expansion to target the US market. Now, if we shift our focus to the small and medium power transformers, then we are seeing a steady growth in the global demand, and that is projected to increase at nearly 6% CAGR between 2024 and 2030. However, production capacity is not keeping pace. It's expected to grow at just 2% over the same period. So, this gap might suggest to someone like there's tightness in the market, but in reality, that's not the case. The small to medium power transformer segment still has significant existing capacity that remains underutilized. Current utilization rates worldwide for small to medium power transformers hover somewhere around 55%, which has resulted in relatively limited investments in new capacity so far. That said, utilization rate is definitely expected to improve for this segment as well, and it will reach approximately 65% by 2030. And if demand surprises on the upside, particularly from the renewables and the industrial electrification, this could definitely accelerate the investment cycles in this segment. Lead times for small to medium power transformers are still relatively manageable at less than 1 year. However, if the segment begins to tighten, especially in the regions where with fast growing renewable build outs, we could see the timelines to stretch for these transformers as well. Geographically speaking, most of the manufacturing expansion for the small to medium power transformer, that is happening in the APAC region, with a strong focus on export markets, particularly to the Latin America and the Middle East and Africa. Europe is the second most active region in this space, as utilities and OEMs prepare for the increasing domestic demand and opportunities abroad. Now, as our focus was Europe, so if we now zoom in on Europe, that is the focus of our deep dive. The European power transformer market is, as per PTR's analysis, is forecasted to grow with a CAGR of 12.7%. So the global growth rate was around 10%, and European base case CAGR is 12.7%, which is predominantly driven by the massive integration of renewable energy. Now, Europe plans to produce at least 55% less greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to the 1990 levels. And this includes usage of renewable for electricity production, and that will ultimately lead to surge in power transformer market demand. In Nordic countries, the primary factor for power transformers demand is the aging grid infrastructure, which hasn't undergone undergone significant replacements in 40 to 50 years. Consequently, much of it has reached the end of its lifespan, and now there's a need of urgent replacement there. Peak electricity use across the Europe is also expected to increase by almost 30% this decade, with much of this demand stemming from the electrification of industries, data centers, and heat pumps. That is also another emerging trend in the European market. Now, if we talk about some of the investment numbers, then the ambitious 1 trillion euro investment that is used to add low greenhouse gas emission energy sources and 0.5 trillion euro investment targets for grid expansion by 2030, they will also translate into intelligent, T&D infrastructure dependent on the power transformers as well to enable the efficient and secure grid. And Now, let's take a look at the announced investment in new production facilities and expansions for power transformers since 2021 in the European region. So Hitachi Energy, which is at the forefront of this investment worldwide, it aims to increase its global power transformer production capacity by 30 to 40% by 2030, we can say. But all these announcements that Hitachi Energy has made, they are expected to come online by 2027. So as a part of their investments that they have announced in the European market, PTR estimates that Hitachi Energy will add more than 14,000 MVAs of capacity for large power transformers by 2027. For example, if you look at the Ludwika facility, then Hitachi Energy plans to add this facility by 38%. And if we talk about the investment that they are making in Germany, that is also for large power transformers. And due to the but our primary research indicates that due to the limited space on this site, expansion will only allow the company to produce few additional units per annum once completed. This Cordova facility that specializes in very large power and shell type transformers, and that is being expanded primarily to target the North American market rather than European market. And the Vasa facility that will produce significantly higher number of additional units as it manufactures small power transformers compared to the other ones. Now, PTR analysis indicates that roughly two-thirds of the planned investment in this, I would say, facility will be allocated to restoring the portion of the facility that was damaged by the fire in March 2023, and only one third will be allocated for the expansion. If we talk about the Collector Ultra, that is another major player investing in the market with a record volume of orders and factory capacity sold out until mid 2025. Collector Ultra is already taking orders to produce power transformers in the second half of 2025 and through 2026 as well. So by 2026, the company plans to triple its production capacity in Serbia with investments totaling somewhere around 10.5 million euros. Meanwhile, they are also expanding their Slovenian facility, which manufactures medium power transformers, with the expansion of 60 million euros over the next 5 to 6 years. That includes the construction of a new production hall and expand some facilities. Felemex Trofo. They used to be a key player in the high capacity transformers market in Spain, but the company is now expanding its manufacturing capabilities to include small power transformers driven by increasing demand in the country. Upon completion of the expanded facility, which is expected in 2025, the company will be able to manufacture additional units in 10 to 30 MVA range. Uh, if we talk about the R&S group, then R&S group has announced plans to invest $54 million between 2025 and 2026. However, this investment won't be solely for power transformers, but it will focus on expanding production capacity of power transformers, cast resin dry type transformers, and some oil type transformers that are being manufactured in Kite Power Tech, their subsidiary. Uh, our primary research, one of my colleagues attended Middle East Energy this month, and they heard from there like SGB Smith and Conchar. They are also planning to expand their power transformer manufacturing capacities, though it hasn't been announced yet officially. Now, if we talk about the supply side outlook of the Europe, now PTR projects additional 50,000 MVAs of large power transformer capacity in the region will be added by 2030, and About 40% of this expansion is already underpinned by the announced investments. If we talk about small to medium power transformers, then we expect capacity to grow by more than 23,000 MVAs between 2024 and 2030. Close to half of that investment has already been disclosed. These transformers are serving a dual purpose. So basically, this expansion is happening not only to meet the local European demand, but also to support the export markets, particularly in Middle East. Today, if we talk about the utilization rates, then in the European manufacturing facilities, utilization rates are already quite high. So they range somewhere between 80 to 90% for small to medium power transformers and 75 to 85% for large power transformers. However, if actual output continues to lag behind installed capacity, the reasons for this is largely due to the recurring issues such as quality control failures, testing bottlenecks, raw material and component shortages, all of which are basically straining the supply chain and resulting in lower utilization rates than what they can potentially realize. Now, despite these hurdles, Europe maintains a strong production advantage. The region's total power transformer manufacturing capacity exceeds the local demand, which allows European suppliers to remain key exporters, especially of large power transformers to the markets like North America and the Middle East. At the same time, ongoing shift toward renewable energy across Europe that is also driving the increased demand for small to medium power transformers, both for the utility scale and the distributed applications. Now, if we examine the production landscape in more detail, so as of today, Europe's installed production capacity for large power transformers stands somewhere around 240,000 MVAs. That notably exceeds its domestic demand. This surplus allows European manufacturers, like I said, to serve the international markets with a sizable share of output being exported to North America and the Middle East. And by 2030, we expect like roughly 50,000 MVAs will be added, and the installed capacity will cross more than 290,000 MVAs in the European region. And just to let our audience know, we consider Turkey as a part of Europe because we see a lot of movement in transformer manufacturing in the Turkish market. So that is a part of the European market. In comparison, the current capacity for small to medium power transformers is much lower at say around more than 90,000 MVAs. However, this segment is gaining momentum, particularly, like I said, as renewable energy deployment accelerates across the continent. PTR forecasts that this will, like the production capacity of small to medium power transformer, it will also increase to more than, I would say, 115,000 MVAs by 2030. Despite these capacity figures, lead times continue to be a challenge in the European markets. So, large power transformers in Europe currently have lead times of 4 to 5 years, and with demand expected to outpace new capacity addition, these delays may increase further by the end of the decade. For small to medium power transformer, lead times are shorter, typically between 8 to 12 months. But even here, if there's a sustained demand growth, that could introduce delays if capacity isn't scaled proportionally. Uh, Overall, Europe remains a net exporter of power transformers. While it imports some small to medium power transformers, it exports significant volume of high-value large transformers that underscores the region's strength in complex, capital-intensive manufacturing. I would say, with new large power transformer production facilities coming online, we anticipate a continued reduction in import reliance and stable export levels, which is supported by the robust global demand, as we discussed already. Now, to wrap up our session, let's look at the strategic takeaways and investment applications for OEMs going forward, like how they can benefit from this supply demand dynamics worldwide. So, if we zoom out and focus on the bigger picture, everything we have discussed so far, such as supply chain disruptions, capacity expansions, shifting market dynamics, they all lead us to a critical turning point in the transformer industry. So the map on this slide provides a regional snapshot of where the world stands in terms of production capacity versus demand for power transformers between 2025 and 2030. It clearly highlights the imbalances, both surpluses and deficits across different geographies. So if we look at the graph, then we can clearly see like Middle East, Africa, and North America, they are expected to face deficits across the board for both large power transformers and small to medium power transformers. And this signals a heavy reliance on the imports unless new investments are made in local manufacturing. APEC, if you talk about the APEC region, uh, one might argue there is a lot of surplus capacity lying around in APEC region. Why don't they start supplying transformers from APEC to North American or Middle East African market? So the point is, uh, like APEC, when you are to supply power transformer to a certain utility or a certain entity, you have to meet certain standards. There are, you know, you have to go to their approved vendor list and everything. So a lot of factors comes into play. That's why a lot of surplus capacity is lying there in the APEC region underutilized. Now, having said that, APEC with or without China in the picture, it is well positioned to meet the substantial portion of power transformers demand in both the Middle East and the North American market. Uh, like I said, there's sufficient capacity in the APEC, but they're not always able to supply to these MEA and NAM markets. So this presents a meaningful demand gap, which translates into tangible market opportunities for the transformer manufacturers. So if you talk about the European manufacturers, like what exactly it means for them, so they are well placed to step in. Europe already supplies 40% of the US imports of large power transformers. And with additional investments in large power transformer manufacturing capacity, suppliers can further consolidate their role in meeting US and Middle East Africa demand. For OEMs who are considering the North American market, I would say timing is very critical. The region is capacity constrained, and early investment could offer a decisive first mover advantage. So, if you are planning to establish a facility, let's say local facility in North America, do it right now because now is the time. Otherwise, you will lose the early mover advantage. Now, there's also a geopolitical angle to consider. So, particularly when we talk about the potential for skewed tariffs under the future, like under a Trump administration, uh, but what do we mean by these skewed tariffs? So typically, when the U.S. imposes tariffs on trading partners like Canada or Mexico, these countries have indicated that they will retaliate back. They will impose retaliatory tariffs, uh, creating a tit for tat dynamic that raises the cost on both sides for power transformers in U.S. as well as in Canada and Mexico. However, this pattern doesn't necessarily hold when it comes to the European countries. Historically, the US has maintained relatively more stable and favorable trade relations with Europe, even during the periods of protectionist policies. This imbalance or skew in how tariffs are applied and reciprocated could reshape the competitive landscape. It is quite possible a Trump administration might impose a tariff on the European market, but they might not retaliate back like other countries do. So like right now they account for the 40% of the import of light power transformers, and that after this change of dynamics, that percentage could increase. Uh, now, if we uh, like I said, if we uh, look at the EMEA region now. For example, in Middle East Africa region, there's a lot of movement in Saudi Arabian market, and our research source shows like Saudi Arabia is Saudi electricity company, in particular in Saudi Arabia, they are installing 100 to 150 substations per annum. This shows like there's a huge demand for power transformers, but at the same time there's only one single manufacturer of power transformers in Saudi Arabia, and that is Saudi Power Transformer Company (SPTC), and they also manufacture small power transformers, small to medium. When it comes to light power transformer, it's import-driven market. Though we have seen some announced investment from Voltem Oman, Al or EIC themselves in the market, that like they will initially expand their small to medium power transformer manufacturing facilities and then start manufacturing large. But there's I would say opportunity there in the Middle East Africa market and Saudi Arabia market in particular. So what OEMs can do is like they can establish a joint venture with the local partners there, because Saudi Arabia has their this policy of local content waiver. So let's say when you announce that you are going to set up a facility in Saudi Arabia, so they allow you to basically import power transformers from your home country, from your facility located outside Saudi Arabia, unless and until your facility that you are setting up in Saudi Arabia, it starts manufacturing. So in short, like manufacturers and suppliers who act quickly and strategically, they stand to benefit from this significant growth as the global market continues to evolve and localize. Now, other than transformer OEMs, there is another key takeaway for the suppliers of transformer components and the raw materials. Basically, there's a clear opportunity presented by the current supply chain challenges to them. Right now, many transformer OEMs are operating well below their optimal utilization levels, not because of the weak demand, but because of they simply can't get enough critical parts and materials like tap changers, bushings, or insulation paper. This bottleneck has created significant gap that these suppliers can capitalize on. A great example of this is MR. Basically, MR is actively expanding its production footprint across several regions, including the US, China, Italy, and Germany, in order to meet the growing demand and ease the pressure on transformer OEMs. If you talk about this, like for other suppliers, for other raw material and the component suppliers, this trend clearly signals a direction. Those who invest in scaling up capacity now, they are very much likely to become strategic partners of choice as OEMs are looking to stabilize their supply chain and ramp up production in the coming years. So the market is very favorable for both transformer OEMs as well as the raw material suppliers, I would say. Uh, that was it from our end. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Azar and Hassan, for your insightful presentation. The information is incredibly valuable and relevant. We'll now begin the live Q&A session. I encourage our audience to submit their questions via the comments. I can already see a few coming through, but I have a question from my side first. So I'd like to ask you, what is China's production capacity for power transformers, and can it effectively address the global supply shortfall? Thank you.
Okay. Um, if you talk about the China, then like I said, APEC region with or without China is has sufficient capacity to address the global market demand. In terms of absolute numbers, um, China has roughly around 2 million MVAs of power transformer manufacturing capacity, and that account for almost 70% of the APEC manufacturing capacity. So yes, China has significant spare capacity lying around to address the market, and if they start supplying power transformers to these North American and the European markets, then the market can become highly uncompetitive, I would say, for the suppliers already operating there. But that is a big if like they would be ever allowed to do so.
Yes, thank you. And I have another question as well from the audience. That is, what is the current volume of power transformer exports from China and South Korea to the US?
Okay, so in terms of imports, like I said, 40% of the power transformers in the US, they are right now being imported from the European market. If you talk about the Chinese suppliers, then they only account for roughly 10% of the US imports. However, if we talk about the South Korean players, then they are supplying significant compared to China, I would say. So South Korea accounts for 20% of the small to medium power transformers imports and 10% of large power transformer imports to the US market, uh, just like China. So South Korea is more or less in parallel with the China for large power transformers.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if our audience would like to do or got any questions. Otherwise, I will hand over to you in case you want to add something else, any details, any valuable information that you feel is relevant for this session. I,
I think just to add, like, I see a couple of questions around the recording for the webinar, and then maybe slides that I think the recording would be available on LinkedIn later on, as well as the slides as well would be accessible on QuimeE's website. Maybe Alexandra, if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, so the webinar and the presentation will be available on demand from Quime website. Any other questions? Anything that you'd like to add? Well, so if not, I would like to thank you, everyone who attend this webinar. Thank you as well, Azar and Hassan, for your excellent presentation. I hope our audience found the insights and knowledge shared today valuable. A big thank you as well to everyone behind the scenes who work hard to make this webinar a success. As mentioned earlier, and I will repeat it again, the webinar will be available on demand on our website, and we look forward to see you all at the next Climate Tech Talks and in Berlin this June from the 3rd to the 5th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Uh, I don't know if, sorry to interrupt, but I think there is